right, everybody. Let's see if we are working on all four cylinders, all 8 cylinders. Depends what kind of car you're running. All right, jumping into my Creator Studio. Oh, you can't even see it. I need to fix that. It's got to be that one up there, I think. All right, hang on a second. Let me make an adjustment. Okay, I'm up to the ceiling now. See what that does. Ah, you still can't read it. Dang it. Sound is good. What I'm trying to show you is my new Macna poster. Grr. That was my big goal. All right. So, first of all, welcome to the live stream. I know there's a lot going on this weekend. There's a lot of people, hobbyists and industry people, that are at RAP in New York today and tomorrow. If you have not gone to RAP yet, you should go. So if you're in that general area, you could buy a ticket to go tomorrow, or you could get in your car right now and go. You can just look up RAP New York. That should be easy to find in Google. And let me turn this sound all the way down so we have no echo. Then the reason I called this episode Club Melev, it's kind of a joke. I love to joke about that because I'll be in my car and I've got the music blaring, and somebody will answer, somebody will call me up and I'll answer the phone with the music just blaring, and I was like, "Welcome to Club Melev, how can I help you?" So anyway, that's been an ongoing joke for a long time, just between me and one other person, if they happen to call. But recently I had someone send me an email. They thanked me for the channel. They said they really appreciated the content, and that they have no local club where they are. They have no club at all. So they tune in every week for the live stream to join Club Melev. And I thought, oh, that's kind of awesome. Because for a long time, I wanted to give our group a name. I've heard, like, Philip DeFranco is one of my favorite channels to follow. And he has DeFranco Nation. And I've seen other groups that all have these names, and no one has a name. So, I asked a while back in a poll, what would you guys like to be called? And everyone's like, nothing. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I just thought, this is kind of cute. And it probably won't stick, but I kind of liked it for at least today's episode. Now, I told you guys I wanted you to ask questions today. I want to answer some questions from last week, because last week's video had a number of people ask questions, and I felt like, wow, I really missed a bunch, and I apologize for that. So I am going to grab a couple of these and answer them right now while you're posting your new questions for this week, and hopefully I will get all of it. So I really should have prepared better for this. I was going to actually cut them out and build a video, but I didn't have time. My week was very full. So the first question that I saw last week that I wish I had addressed was a question about an RO system, asking how far can you move water from the RO system to the to your barrel, to your tank, if that's what you're doing. And the maximum distance allowed is 40 feet. So if you go larger than that, longer distance than that, what you're doing is you're putting back pressure on the membrane, and it makes the membrane less efficient. Odds are more water will go down the waistline just because. So the rule is 40 feet, total tubing. It's not vertical feet versus horizontal feet, that's just feet. So if you take a piece of tubing 40 feet long and you get to the end of it, that's it. Don't go any farther. All right. Someone asked me if I've ever done freshwater. I have never done freshwater. When I was a little kid, my dad had a predator tank, and so we had to feed it goldfish. So we had a small square jar on the kitchen counter with goldfish. We'd buy 100 at a time. And that's the extent of my freshwater, and that was literally just feeders to throw to the lionfish and to the grouper, to the octopus, to the anemone. So that is, I know nothing about freshwater. Matter of fact, years ago, I went to speak in a I don't remember which state. Let's just say Indiana, because I have no idea where I was. And it was an event that had saltwater and freshwater combined, which usually doesn't happen. Usually we have saltwater conferences, and then there's freshwater, but to put them together under the same roof is kind of rare. And so what had happened was I got picked up by someone that's completely freshwater. They knew nothing about me or saltwater, and vice versa. I knew nothing about him. So we went to grab a meal, and then he told me, or I asked him, because the conversation was pretty empty. I said, "So, what kind of tank do you have?" And he told me, and I said, "Where do you live? Can I see it?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm just 2 minutes away." So we got in his car and we drove there, and I'm looking, and he had a planted tank, which was pretty. I mean, it's green. I know nothing about freshwater. I mean, it was pretty, and I got to see lots of little tiny shrimp and stuff running around in there. And then there was this large triangular fish. And I asked him, "What kind of fish is that?" And he looked at me and he said, "That's an angel." And, in my head, that's no angel. An angel is like a flame angel, a coral beauty, or an emperor angel. I mean, we saltwater people have angels, right? And his is a triangular one. I'm probably wrong, but I'm sure I've seen this fish on the front of a Tetra container, Tetra Foods. And anyway, he said, "You know nothing about freshwater." I was like, "You're right. I don't know anything." So that was funny. And to this day, I've never tried to learn anything more about it, honestly. I've got enough to do with keep my reef alive and answering questions all day long, every single day. I get emails, and I get messages, and I get texts, and I get voicemails. Okay, so Beth asked the question last week, how do you raise and maintain your pH level in your tank? And I have an article on my website that is called "Don't Chase the pH." And it's a really important discussion because if you're using a pH buffer, it says right on the jar, pH buffer 8.3, and you take a scoop and you put it in your tank, and your tank goes up to 8.3, and you test and you're happy. And you just keep doing this every single day to hit this magic 8.3. What's actually happening in the background is your alkalinity continues to climb and climb and climb, and you could get up into the 20 DKH level just trying to hit pH of 8.3. So I don't recommend chasing it. Now, that being said, how are you measuring your pH? If you're using a controller or if you're using a pH monitor, which, by the way, one of the best ones for economically is the American Pinpoint pH monitor. It's a small device with an LCD screen on it, and it has a probe that goes in your sump or your display tank, and it just tells you the number around the clock. You just glance at the monitor, and it says right on there what the pH is. And I bought myself one many years ago, and I kind of want one just because, but I haven't needed it because I run the Apex, and the Apex controller measures my pH and reports to me constantly. I have a pH probe in my calcium reactor, I have a pH probe in my reef, and I have a pH probe in my quarantine tank. So I have 3 different sources that I'm watching on a daily basis just to see what the number is. Now, your aim is between 7.9 and 8.3, somewhere in there. Ideally, we love 8.3, but there's a lot of people that never hit it. There's people out there that are 7.9 to 8.1, being 7.9 early in the morning before the lights even come on, and then the peak of the day, 6-7 hours into the light period, it's around 8.1. And that's perfectly fine. I don't want you to sit there and think, I need a higher pH just to hit a magic number. It's all about the livestock. How is your livestock doing? Or if you're running your lights too long, that can affect pH. If you have a lot of pets in the house and a lot of mouth breathers, a lot of humans, then you're going to have them exhaling a lot of CO2. And that raises the CO2 level in the room, which drops the pH down in the tank. Also in the summer, and of course in the winter, when we lock up our homes and stop any fresh air from getting in, your pH will be lower than if you had wide open windows. So those people that live in the areas of the nation where the temperature around the clock is around 75 degrees, they benefit from open doors and windows, where a lot of us, like here in Texas yesterday, wow, it was 106 degrees where I am. And I was wiped out. Matter of fact, I'm still coming off of yesterday. I tried to finally motivate myself to go to the gym last night. Threw on my, my gym clothing and got up there, and it was closed. I couldn't believe it, because they're open till midnight. And so I got there at 11, knowing I get like a 20, 30-minute workout. Turns out on Fridays they close at 10. So, oops. But when it's really crazy hot outside, we close our windows, we close our doors, we keep everything sealed tight, and we run the AC, and you have no fresh air, and your pH may drop. Now, that being said, where I live, they open the windows and doors to walk in and out. I mean, I almost never open a window, I open doors. And my pH tends to run around 8.3. maybe a little bit higher at the end of the day, and of course in the morning it's around 8.1. But there are people out there that have had tanks that look good that are running 7.7 to 7.9. So really, to answer your question, Beth, how do you maintain a pH? Well, bringing in fresh air is one method. Making sure that your salinity, your temperature, your alkalinity, magnesium, and calcium are all the right level. Because if they're all there, your pH will take care of itself. But if your magnesium is crazy low, or if your alkalinity is crazy high, or if your tank is too hot, all these things affect the oxygen level in the water, which affects the pH. So we want to avoid that. All right, I'm going to jump over here and see what's going on here with some questions. Why am I not at Reefapalooza in New York? I've never been to Reefapalooza in New York. I've been to the California one, I've been to the Florida one, and I just decided, I just got back from 2 trips back to back. I've got another trip in less than 4 weeks, and then I got MACNA in September. So all of this is going on, so making a trip to Reefapalooza just was not on my list of things to do. All right. Peter Hartman asks in this week's video, or the live stream, what about flatworms? And he wants to know if there's a danger. He wants to know what's the required treatment. If you can go to melevsreef.com/flatworms, that should get you to my article on how to treat. You want to make sure you have the right type of flatworms to treat. You know, don't just willy-nilly say that's a flatworm, I'm treating my tank. Number 1, it should be rusty orange. Number 2, it should be a red planaria. And if it's something else, then I wouldn't be treating the tank to kill them necessarily. You might just want to siphon them out with some airline tubing. But please do read that article. If you can't find it, just go into Google and type flatworms, type melevsreef.com. Google will give you the right pages. There's an identification for Critter ID, and then of course there's the full article on how to treat your tank for red planaria, and that's what you want to look up. I'm sorry, Fish Pimp, that I didn't have laser smoke machines and techno beat. That's it. Okay, Nano Reef Keeper asked really quick, how much water needs to come out of the waistline? He said, can you fine tune it or just use it the way it is? I have brand new cartridges, and my TDS is around 3. So a standard RODI system makes 1 gallon of good to 4 gallons of waste. So if you make a 5-gallon bucket of RO water or RODI water, you're going to have 20 gallons of waste. That's just what it is. If you were to adjust the output by replacing the flow restrictor or adding a ball valve on the waistline to restrict it further, what you'll end up doing is wearing out the membrane prematurely. And a membrane can last between 1 and 5 years. It used to be between 3 and 5 years, but it has actually gone down to 1 and 5 years because of the type of water we get. Matter of fact, last week on the Melev's Reef page on Facebook, I actually posted about TDS of source water. And if you are a Reef Trace user, I would love it if you would go test your source water today for TDS and then enter that number in your app. And there's a choice. It'll say source, RO, DI. Just give us the source water. That's all I care about. I don't care if your DI is 0. That's what it's supposed to be. It should be that anyway. But I'd really like to know what your source water is, because I want the guys at Reef Trace to kind of give us like a map of the U.S. or I always say U.S., but it really is an international app. So for your country, it'd be really cool if we could see the numbers around the planet and see what everyone's getting in their general areas. And if we could do this like every 3 months, we could see trends of how water is affected by the seasons, how it's affected by the city. You know, do they give you the exact same water all year long? Or do they put more stuff in the water in the summer to keep us safer because of drought conditions, for example? Do they put less stuff in the water in winter? That water coming out of your pipes in the winter is colder, where in the summer it's usually typically warmer. And that's why when it's coming out warmer, you'll notice your RO system is running faster than usual. So quick tip, if you didn't catch this in one of my videos in the past, if you are used to making 5 gallons of water in like 80 minutes in the winter, it might only take 55 minutes in the summer. That's a big difference. So make sure you're setting your timers. Make sure you are not flooding your rooms, your homes. Your spouse will get really upset with you for getting the floor all wet. I have a friend who just posted how she flooded her apartment and the water got down 2 stories down. So if you are collecting water in an apartment complex, I would highly recommend that you put your water collection vessel in your bathtub or in a sink to collect that water, so that way if the system continues to run and you forget to turn it off, then the water just goes into the drain and quietly goes away. And it costs you more in water, but you did not affect the people's sheetrock in their apartments. How am I trying to say that? You understand what I'm saying, right? Don't ruin the stuff for the neighbors downstairs because you forgot. And here's another thing, and I don't understand it. And I saw some posts about it, and it really surprised me. People were talking about their floats failing. How does a float fail exactly? I have been running floats on all of my vessels for years, and I don't remember ever replacing a float that was bad. A float's job is to rise up and push a rubber flapper over the hole that the water's coming out, so that way you, in theory, keep a dry floor. It won't stop the water 100%, but it'll stop at 95.3%. Basically, a little bit will drip past it, just a drip. The wastewater's shooting out your drain nonstop, so it's your fault if you let it run connected to a float valve. The float valve keeps your floor dry, but as soon as you see it's full, you need to go over there and turn off your RODI system. And that's what I do. I don't rely on the float valve to do anything but keep the floor dry. But okay, so let's just say float valves do go bad. Let's say the float fills up with water and it can't rise anymore. Or let's say it's 10 years old and you're using the same one. Well, you could replace it. Floats aren't that expensive. But how is it was weird. I was thinking, people were saying my float failed to me. It failed to me several times. I'm like, how does it fail? Now, the one thing it might be doing, and I didn't ask the question to that person specifically, maybe they had their float on an acrylic bracket or something. It was hanging on a trash can, and so the entire thing bobbled up. I don't know, and feel free in the comments here to tell me how your float has failed. But like I said, I've got one in that 45-gallon vessel under my reef that I installed in 2011, same float. I've got one in my 265-gallon poly tank that I put in 2010, same float. And I've got one in the frag system that's been running now for 2.75 years, same float. Now that one, I didn't have to replace the float, but it did leak out the top, and I had to basically loosen the nut, remove the tubing, cut off an inch, put the tubing back in, and retighten. That was just a failure of the connection, and maybe that's what they were talking about. I don't know, but a float itself should definitely stop the water. All right. I don't know if that answered enough for you, but that's my thoughts on that. Brian Bonilla asks, how soon after finishing cycling can I add fish? I actually added 2 damsels in a 40-gallon 2 days ago. The cycle was complete. How soon after my next edition? Okay, so if you can imagine your tank has 1 million bacteria, and you drop in 2 fish, and you feed those fish, and the fish poop, the bacteria level will now rise. I'm not going to say exponentially, but let's just say it jumped up to 1.2 million bacteria. And if you were to drop in 40 fish the next day, that 1.2 million bacteria is not enough to keep up with the waste load. So as you add new livestock, you always let the tank kind of adapt and let the bacteria levels rise accordingly, so that way it'll be ready when you add another new fish or 2. But I wouldn't recommend adding a whole bunch, especially on a new tank that just completed the cycle. And based on what I see these days, there's a good chance that your tank was set up with dry sand and dry rock, which means there's very little life in there other than what you've added, whether it was the raw shrimp or you poured in some Dr. Tim's or some Turbo Start or any of those types of things. But just be gradual in adding things. Enjoy the new pieces of livestock you add one at a time, and that way you can appreciate it for what it is. And then when you are shopping and you see something nice you see at the store, you can add that new thing. And you can add little corals more quickly than you can fish. Fish are, we take our time with fish. Edward Lee asks, why is calcium and alkalinity needed via dosing? Does calcium and alkalinity always go down? And if it does, why? Well, we're running reef tanks, and with reef tanks, they're filled with corals. And the corals, and even the fish, are absorbing alkalinity and calcium and magnesium and iodine. They're absorbing all, and so, same with invertebrates. I don't want to leave them out. The shrimp especially love iodine. It helps them molt. So We are to replace what's being used up by the livestock. It's not the saltwater using it up, and it's not the rock using it up. It's not the sand. It's the living corals. The SPS corals are made of calcium, and they build more and more calcium within themselves, and the tissue continues to grow new skin, and that calcium is being taken out of the water. The alkalinity is being taken out of the water. So that's why we dose it. And if you're running a fish-only system, you probably don't need to dose it at all. But it is good to measure it at least once a month to just see where you're at in case you need to dose a little bit, or maybe increase your water changes. I will talk about magnesium. I saw that. I wanted to find this other question that I didn't get last week. Someone last week it wasn't a question, but they said they'd like to see more videos about cutting acrylic and making sumps. Well, that's what I do for a living, so you're never going to kind of see everything behind the curtain, but I do share little tidbits here and there. And I have a huge article on my website about all the tools I use. Just go to melezreef.com/tools, and you can see all the tools I used in the past. Now I have nicer tools than when I wrote that article. And then, of course, I have lots of examples of sumps that I built over the years, and there are some current sumps in the shop area of designs I make. And I build sumps every month. So, again, how much can I show you and undercut my own business, But, I'll see what I can do. Maybe I'll do something interesting with time lapse at some point. I haven't done that in a very long time. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find. I wish I'd cut these all out. Frederick Nietzsche last week asked, is it fine to run very low flow through activated carbon? Absolutely. I read an article years ago that completely made sense to me. It resonated with me completely, where the author was recommending very slow flow through carbon. He actually recommended 1 gallon an hour, which is, no one does that. So very slow flow should go through your carbon, and that way you'll get maximum results. Carbon is only good for about 3 days or so. And if you don't believe me, that's okay, but it's the truth. Your water will get more clear, and then after 4 or 5 days, you'll notice that the clarity is going away already. Carbon has already absorbed everything it could, and it's time to remove it from the system entirely. I only recommend running carbon for about 3 or 4 days, once a month. Just polish the water and remove it. And I know people like to just throw it in a mesh bag and throw it in the sump, or they put some in a hang-on back filter, or they put in a reactor like I do, and they just let it run nonstop, and they change it once a month. But basically, having carbon sitting in a reactor nonstop, after a while, it just starts, from what I've read, it starts to just generate nitrate. And we don't need nitrate in our tank. It's a nitrate bed, get it out. So, as I mentioned last week, when you have a reactor that is done, and you're not going to need it for a while, if you just close the valve to turn it off, make sure that you remove that and throw away the liquid inside, because the water in there will turn toxic. There's times where I'm just too busy. I will remove the reactor, put it on the floor in my fish room, and I unscrew the lid and take it off so it can breathe. Because one time, years ago, I made the mistake of just taking the reactor out and putting it on the floor, full of water, sealed, and everything inside it turned sulfuric. And when I lifted the lid, it was like a green sludge in there. It was very strange, and it smelled horrible, of course, as you can imagine. And it took a lot to clean it, because it even discolored some of the material. Some of the perforated plates had changed colors. They weren't white anymore. So at least remove the lid and let evaporation do its thing until you can get around to it. But don't just leave it sealed sitting there. You'll regret that. Okay, I'm going to jump back here. Someone asked me a minute ago about magnesium. So yes, actually I did talk about magnesium last week. So if you could watch the carbon dosing video, if you could strike that, go back 10 seconds. If you could watch the Let's Discuss Dosing video from last week, I talked about magnesium. But basically, our goal is to be 3 times the level of your calcium in your tank. I'd like it to be somewhere around, I would like it to be around 1,300 to 1,400. That's what I recommend. And 1280 is the golden standard. I like to go a little bit higher because Montipora loves magnesium. All right, hang on. You guys are asking questions fast and furious. I need to speed up my pace here. Max asked, what nanometer of lights do you recommend? I don't know. Dave Z is at Rap New York right now. What are you doing on a live stream? Go enjoy the rap. Go enjoy the rap. That's what I have to say. Marine TV said, is it okay for my 65-gallon with LPS to deplete 1 DKH of alkalinity in 3 days? Yes, that sounds very normal. LPS corals are stony corals and they need alkalinity. That's why you dose every single day to maintain it and keep it up. He says, I want mine to be at 8, but it drops to 7. And, well, that's totally normal. Hi, JS. So you're going to need to dose, and I recommend you dose daily. And I recommend you test frequently, so that way you stay at that 8 you want to be at all the time. Let's see. Jester J asks, do you ever get bored or lazy with regards to tank maintenance? I'm having troubles doing water changes on time. Jester, how many water changes do you do? By the way, I'm looking at your little profile picture. I love that. That's awesome. I don't do water changes except in extreme circumstances. I've just become crazy lazy about water changes, which is a little bit ridiculous. But I have the best of intentions, and I'm not staying on top of it. I am staying on top of water testing. I am staying on top of all my equipment, and I clean my tank regularly. But changing water, I just don't do enough of it, and I'd like to improve that in the second half of 2018. Fish Pimp says, wet carpets are the best way to remember you left the RO on. See, there's something in my throat, and nothing's going to get it out. Thank you. I got a compliment about this poster that's behind me. I just put that up today before this video. I brought it home from Las Vegas. I was there last month, and I got to preview the hotel for MACNA. And so I took down the old poster from the MACNA I helped organize back in 2012. I was one of the 3 guys that ran it. And I put up this one, so I'm really excited about that. And I just wish my light wasn't blasting out the top part. That's the most important part. So I will read it to you. MACNA 2018, Marine Aquarium Conference of North America. It's going to be September 7th through 9th, 2018, in the Las Vegas Westgate Resort. It says the Aquarium Expo will have over 150 exhibitors, displays with captive bred livestock and corals, kids area, and free admission under 18. So these are all awesome things. Now, this is the 30th MACNA, and I'm going to keep talking about MACNA throughout these live streams and upcoming videos because as we get closer and closer, I get more and more excited. Because it's the 30th, which is a huge milestone for any event, they have 30 speakers this year, and I'm one of them. So it's me plus 29 others. All right, let's see. Willie Van Roy asks, what do you think about Miracle Mud? I would just say that I've never used it, and I have not seen nearly enough tanks using Miracle Mud to impress me to the point where I feel I should use it. I remember when it came out years ago, I did some digging into it to see what it was, where it came from, what it may contain. And, some of the things I learned, it's expensive. And you have to replace it in sections every 6 months, I believe. And so you get these trays that fit in your sump, and you have this tray of this mud, and you have another tray and a third tray, and you take out the first tray, dispose it, and replace it with new, and then the next and the next. And it just never impressed me. I never saw a reef tank that I was like, oh my God, this tank is amazing. Oh, you use Miracle Mud? I'm going to start using Miracle Mud. That never happened to me. I saw some tanks with Miracle Mud in the past, and it just hasn't really done a thing for me, and so I don't really recommend it. I'm not trying to hate on it, I just don't see the benefit, and it has not interested me. So I don't go that route, but I know others do. Big Salty says, this past winter I was battling high nitrates of over 100 ppm. Welcome to the Nitrate Club. I upgraded my skimmer, added refugium and biopellets, but didn't test daily now. But now they're at 10 ppm. So what's the next step? Well, 10's great. You've done a great job of bringing them down. And if you can keep them down, that would be ideal, obviously. Matter of fact, I need to do something on my end about that. I called Tammy last night, left her a voicemail, because she's dosing vodka, which I did for years. And I think I'm going to go that route with mine to get mine down, because it's an inexpensive and simple way of doing it, especially with the dosing pump. So I'm looking at doing that. Diacanthus Reef asks, have you ever had a customer order a cylinder tank? Do you have the tools to build it? I have a rule. I don't build anything round. And so no, I have never done that. I've had some questions come up, but I usually just push them to the next person, the next company, because I don't make reactors. I'd like to make some reactors. I really would. I know that's round. I would like to start doing that, because I would love to see a mainstream product of mine in this industry. And right now, I do sumps and I build all kinds of little acrylic things for people, but I don't see everyone using it. And it would be so cool if everyone had a Melev Reef reactor in their sump. That would be kind of a dream of mine. It's nice to have small goals. That's one of mine. Let's see, I just scrolled way too far. I apologize. Let me go back to where I was. PJ Goblin says, hi guys, mainly LPS dominated tank, trying to maintain iodine levels but struggling to test. The iodine test kit is really hard. And what I would recommend instead, PJ, is that I would get a bottle of Lugol solution, which is concentrated iodine. And if your tank is, well, the rule is 1 drop per 50 gallons of water. So if your tank is a 50-gallon tank, I'd put in 1 drop once a week from now on. And that should give your tank the iodine it needs. Don't go crazy and put in 2. Just literally follow that rule. I made the mistake once. I had a 29-gallon and I put in 1 drop and I thought that's ridiculous. And I put in a 2nd drop and I thought my clownfish were going to die. They were gasping, their eyes, I mean, they don't have eyelids, but their eyes look bigger and they were gasping. And I was like, oh my God, and how do you remove iodine from water? I mean, I had no clue what to do, and I just stood there in horror. And fortunately, they recovered, and I had those clowns for many, many years. But don't overdose iodine. So 1 drop per 50 gallons once a week usually is good enough for your tank. And having a successful measuring of you didn't say what kit you were using. I bought an iodine kit years ago. I think it was a CChem kit. And I had a hard time using that kit as well. I kind of felt like I didn't really believe the results. So maybe if you're doing the ICP testing, it could give you some really serious, it gives you the full report of all your water, and it would show your iodine level that week when you sent in the water sample. But I wouldn't go any further than putting in 1 drop a week per 50 gallons. All right. Okay, let me go back to last week, because I know there's some other things I wanted to answer here. Yeah, I remember that comment. Somebody was joking with me last week. Last week, CL Streak asked, what about running Zeovit on a 300-gallon reef tank? Zeovit is a multi-dosing method in conjunction with I'm trying to remember. They have these rocks that they use. They could be Zeovit rocks. I don't think that's right, though. And you put these rocks in a reactor, and then once a week you had to use a plunger to shake up the rocks and get the mold off of them. And you had to put in these different drops every single day. And you had to, my buddy down in Austin, he was running it for a while. I'd say a couple of years, maybe 2.5. And he had a spreadsheet taped on the inside of his door of his cabinet. And he would look at it, and Monday needed 1 drop of this, and Tuesday needed 3 drops of this and 2 drops of that. And then Wednesday it needed 17 drops. And then it was quite the ordeal. And he was doing that for a long time, and then finally he got really fed up with it. It's kind of expensive. But their goal is to get these very, very pastel colors. And we've seen some phenomenal tanks. Typically, it's people in Poland. I don't know what's with the people in Poland, but those guys, I never see a bad SPS reef tank from Poland. Or the only guys doing it are, mad wizards that know exactly how to cast a spell. But when he tried to wean his tank off the Zeovit, his tank had a really hard time suffering. So corals just went downhill. So if you're gonna go Zeovit, you gotta stay with it. It's a method, and weaning your tank off of it, you may run into some issues. Troy Harney asked last week, can you talk about your cleanup crew? What do you think about 100 per gallon rule of thumb for snails and crabs? Okay, that's one of the ones I wanted to address for sure. It's not 100 per gallon. That would be awesome. That's what it looks like in your fish store. No, it's 1 per gallon. So if you have a 100-gallon tank, you need 100 critters. And I'm going to delve into the sand-sifting starfish one more time because I don't feel that we don't warn enough people about this starfish. It's a very active starfish. It's fun to watch. It's got 5 arms. It gets submerses completely in the sand, and then it comes up. And it moves across the sand really fast, so it's fun to watch. But those things eat everything out of your sand bed. I mean, they eat every living bit of life out of your sand bed to where all you have is dead sand. And when you have dead sand, yeah, it's clean for a little bit until it's dead, and then it doesn't stay clean. The starfish may stir it up. You might feel like it's doing a good job, but it's literally destroying the bacteria you want living in your sand. If you have like a 4-inch sand bed like I do, and I know most of you don't, but I love deep sand beds, usually the top ½ inch is where all the living stuff is. And you want bacteria, you want worms, you want little pods, you want little tiny amphipods, shrimp, all that kind of stuff just crawling around in there. There's all kinds of stuff I can't even describe that I've seen under microscopes that I don't know what it is. People say, oh, it's ciliates, or it's this, or it's that. I don't know what that stuff is. But there's a lot of life in, just a teaspoon of sand. If you were to stick it, I say a teaspoon. Let's call it 1/8 of a teaspoon under a microscope. You're just looking at a little bit of stuff. You see all kinds of stuff moving. It's fascinating. And sand-sifting starfish do not belong in reef tanks. It's okay in a fish only. But a reef tank needs living sand. And we even buy live sand and pour it into our tank to add more bacteria. So I don't recommend a sand-sifting starfish. You can definitely have serpent stars. You could do the brittle star that's not green. The green brittle star eats fish, so you don't want that one. They get really big, and you drop food in the water, and they do cartwheels through your reef to get to that food, and they'll grab a fish too. So green brittle stars are not good in a reef tank either. But back to the whole thing, how many critters per gallon? I recommend 1 per gallon, and I know everyone thinks I'm nuts. And that's okay. If you don't want to put that many in, that's your choice. But the more critters you have eating algae in your tank all the time, the less algae you'll ever see in your tank. So someone commented on one of my videos, I think it was on my cleanup crew video, and he said, you're declaring their ultimate death, that you're the cause all these creatures are dying. That's not true. Cleanup crews are great. You are going to lose some snails to hermit crabs. That's what hermit crabs do. It's their job. Their job is to kill a snail and take that shell and make it his new home. That's what they do. So having hermit crabs, having snails, totally normal, circle of life. And having Neisseria snails and having a conch, for every 2 square foot of sand in your tank. What else? You might want a tuxedo urchin or a diadema urchin. These are all parts of the cleanup crew that will definitely help to eat algae on the rocks, on the sand, on the glass. So you want these creatures in there. And if you lose some over time, that's just how it is. But you're not dooming them. You're feeding the tank daily. There's plenty of food in the water. There's plenty of food in there. The fish are pooping. That's plenty of food for the cleanup crew too. But the cleanup crew, its job is to keep the tank clean. So you definitely want that. Robert asked last week, this is the other question I want to answer. My top-up system is gravity fed through a float valve from a reservoir that's refilled with the RO water, from the RO system. Do I need a power head or air stone in there to circulate the water in the reservoir? No, absolutely not. You want your top off reservoir to be sealed, which means to have a lid on top of some kind. If you can put a screw cap, that's even better because it stays pure that way. When it's a wide open container, like let's say it's a small aquarium that has no lid on top, anything can get into that DI water and pollute it. So we do want a sealed container, does not need to be agitated, does not have to be moving, doesn't need oxygen. It's just top off to replace what's evaporated from your system. I think that was it for last week. Those are the ones I wanted to answer. Okay, so I'm back to this week's chat. And oh my goodness, you guys have taken off on here again. And remember, if you're asking questions, I will answer them. Giovanni Estevez says, I have an important question about the Hanna checker, the phosphate and the low phosphorus. What are the difference? And which of the both is the best to test on? Well, I would use one that measures phosphate. That would be my goal because I'm always wanting to know the phosphate level of my tank. And I cannot answer the other half about phosphorus because I have not delved into phosphorus. I measure phosphate. And I don't get ultra low test kits from anyone because my phosphates are never ultra low. My phosphates are usually going to be somewhere between, let's say 0, which would be ideal, which is kind of rare, all the way up to 1.0. So anywhere in there, a regular phosphate kit will measure. And so, Elos has a regular one, and then they have a ultra low. The Hanna checker, like you said, they have their ultra low, and then which is parts per billion. And interestingly about that kit is that it measures crazy low, gives you a number, but you can't just move the decimal point 1 over and that tells you where it is. Instead, you have to use a conversion chart to see what it comes out to. And I don't really understand that one. I need to ask Kevin over at Hanna why that is, because you would just think if it's parts per million, parts per billion, you're just moving a decimal point over. But no, you have to convert it. If you have phosphates so low, you need an ultra low kit, you're doing a great job. And I'd probably tell you to feed your fish more. I see people are still talking about iodine, and it is true. Iodine that goes in the water will, I use the word precipitate, and that's a pretty good word. It just dissolves away very fast, rapidly. But doing 1 drop a week is usually plenty for your tank. And your new salt mix will have iodine already mixed in it too. So if you're doing water changes, you're adding a little bit that way as well. Mike Nielsen asks, new to the coral world, looking for an alternate to dosing pumps at this juncture. Your thoughts on the Red Sea ABC kit or the Brightwell A and B? Those are all being promoted as color kits to bring up more vivid colors in your tank. And I haven't seen the need for that, personally. If your tank is being bathed in blue lighting, your corals are already going to be colorful. And if you go to white lighting, they'll be less colorful. It's logical. You have less blue hitting it. They don't fluoresce as much. Adding different types. Now, you just said you want to get away from dosing, or you're looking for an alternate to dosing, but you're still dosing something. So if you'd like to use one of those kits, you can. For my own tank being the size that it is, it would take a whole bunch of that solution to even see if there's a change. And the hardest part of proving that is to be able to dose it consistently and have nothing else go wrong on your tank during that period, so you can definitely give credit to the dose. Because if anything else goes haywire, like let's say, for example, I'm dosing that product and my alkalinity shoots up, or my calcium reactor clogs up and the alkalinity drops, the corals are going to automatically respond accordingly to the giant change. And it throws off, or it skews the results of the dose I was trying to use. So if you can keep everything perfect, if everything is going smoothly, then yes, you can go ahead and you can give credit to where credit is due. It's really hard to make that happen. I actually have a couple of bottles from Brightwell of some colorful stuff, and it's sitting there on the floor by my reef tank, and I I am going to try it out, but I don't know if I'm going to see any results or if I'm just going to use it up. That's my answer to that. Mr. Reef Buster makes a great point. Manual dosing is a pain in the butt. But I will say a dosing pump will make your life a lot easier. All right. Any more questions, guys? Because I'm seeing lots of conversation here. Okay, Jester J asked about Chlorpa, one of my favorite topics. It's growing out on a rock in my tank, but my 2 clownfish have picked it as a nest and are defensive when I put my hand near the rock. Any idea how to get that algae out? Well, if your clowns are hosting an algae, you have 2 choices. Number 1, you can remove that rock and clean off all the algae. Or number 2, you can have this awesome green tank with some clownfish in it. That's your 2 choices. I've never had clownfish defend algae before, but if they choose it as their nesting spot, I can understand it. I do have a general rule that if my fish try to bite me, they're not going to be in my tank long, because I spend way too much time and money and effort to keep a beautiful reef. And if I can't put my own arm in that tank, I mean, I am literally the hand of God when it comes to the life of that tank. And I have to go in there and do things. And if something's biting me, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I would catch the animal. I would remove those fish. Okay. Should we have substrate in a fish quarantine tank? No, Jim, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put sand in a quarantine tank. Quarantine is literally one step less than hospital. So quarantine's usually a bare bottom tank with some PVC fittings for the fish to hide in at night to feel secure, or to duck and cover if they feel spooked. And usually has a hang on back filter. It may have an air stone, definitely has a heater, definitely has a thermometer. You might want an ammonia alert badge glued to the front glass to let you know if ammonia levels are rising, because that happens really quick, especially in smaller quarantine tanks. But we normally don't put rock or substrate. I have put rock in a quarantine tank in the past, and that rock stayed in that tank forever. I never removed it. It never went to any other system. It literally was, that was it. And then I can tell you this, when my quarantine tank went away, when I finally put it in the trash, I threw that rock away too. I don't want to take any chance of anything that was in that rock getting into my reef. So if you're using live rock as a part of natural biological filtration in a quarantine tank, and you're adding new fish and corals on a regular basis, and it's just part of your, because you like the look, which is the way I would do it, that rock stays in that tank forever. And you can then, if your fish are healthy, move them into the reef. If they're sick, they go into a hospital tank, which again is now a bare bottom tank with medication, some type of chemical that will kill off whatever the fish is infected with. And then I love a quarantine tank for when you come home with new stuff and you don't have time to acclimate it to your own reef, you don't have time to glue it down to the rock work, you don't have time to dip it. Then, if you can throw it in the quarantine tank and just move on with your life, and then in 2 or 3 days, remove it, dip it, and put it into your main tank, that would be the way to go. That's what I did for a long, long time. I kind of miss the days of a quarantine tank. I'm leaning toward getting one set up again. It's been far too long. Safety Stop is something I've been recommending for a long time. It's something that I've been using now since 2011 for any new fish. And Safety Stop is a 2-part bath. It makes your it makes your acclimation process take 2 hours. It is considered rapid quarantine. And what it is literally doing is you're putting the fish you're acclimating to the water of your aquarium, first of all, so it matches temperature and salinity. And then you put it into a bucket with part 1 of Safety Stop, and you've now put it in formalin, which you would add an air stone and a heater, and that fish will be in that solution for 45 minutes. And then as soon as that timer has elapsed, and it's time to switch, you then take another gallon of water from your tank and take part B, which is methylene blue, and you move the fish over to the methylene blue for 45 minutes. And then I put it in the Peacemaker, which is an acrylic box that I hang in my display tank, and the fish stays in that box for 3 days where everyone can see it, and they share the water through holes in the box, but it has eliminated all aggression in my reef. Anytime I get a new fish, instead of putting it in the tank and hoping they get along, they see it in an acrylic box with a lot of holes. It's clear, and they see it for 3 days. I can feed the reef, I can feed the fish in that box, and then after 3 days has elapsed, I can pour the fish into the reef, and so far so good. I've had no bad squabbles of any kind, but that has spoiled me for quarantine tanks. I just haven't done it, and maybe I've gotten super lucky, but that's why I'm kind of thinking maybe I should get back to it, just because I have to set a good example. But I do like to just be impulsive like you guys. It happens to me as well. Wait, what's this about sand from a beach? Jester, I have a 5-gallon bucket of sand collected from a beach. Any suggestions what to do with it? First of all, you want to know what kind of sand it is. And if it's aragonite based and it's clean, you could use it in an aquarium. How do you find out if it's aragonite based? Take a teaspoon of it and put it in a small dish of white vinegar. And if it fizzles and bubbles, and it sort of looks like hydrogen peroxide is melting it away, then it's aragonite based or calcium based, and it's a good sand. If it's not, it's probably silica based, which is glass, and not quite as popular in our tanks. The risk with any kind of sand from a beach is the pollutants that may be in the sand, but you can always wash the sand, and you can see if anything comes of it. If you could end up with a bunch of clean sand. Some people have done this, but most often we buy our sand from a fish store or from an online sand vendor like Marine Depot, Premium Aquatics, BRS. Who else am I forgetting? No. The online vendors. You might even find aquarium sand for sale on Amazon, maybe with free shipping. Okay. Jay says, I think my pastel, I think you're talking about your colors of your corals are more pastel because of too much light. A 250 watt metal halide bulb over a 40 breeder. Yeah, it could be. It could be you're running your light too long per day, or it could be you're running it too close to the water. Your metal halide bulb should be 9 inches to 12 inches off the water, cooking the water of the aquarium first of all. And that distance is important. And then if you're running the lights too long, your corals can get very light looking, and it could be pastel, it could be bleaching. So maybe run that light 6 to 7 hours a day instead of 9 to 12 hours a day. Some people run their lights a little too long. Brandon Skelly says, who's doing live at Reefapalooza, New York? That I don't know, but if you have Facebook friends that are in the hobby, you might find some live streams there, or maybe just use the search box here on YouTube and see what you can come across. Do I still have my dragonets? I have one mandarin. I think you might have saw a video I posted a few months ago that was way back from like 2005, where I had quite a few mandarins. I have one mandarin that I've had now since 2011. It was tank raised by ORA, which is awesome. And now Biota sells tank raised mandarins. And I believe you get them from your fish store. I think the price is still about $80 a fish. But these fish are being raised on fish food, on pellet food. And so they are more likely to survive in an aquarium because they were born in an aquarium. So that's great. I would suggest that now here's the thing. When ORA came out with their mandarins, there was a lot of people that just got mad. And I thought it was awesome. I was super excited. Of course I bought one. And it cost me $80. And I had to buy it from a fish store. And then people would complain it's not eating the fish food. That the fish are dumb or stupid or they don't do what they said or they're being misled. That's not how this works. Just because the mandarins were eating prepared food at ORA for months as they grew from embryos to sellable fish doesn't mean any food you drop in your tank will be eaten by these mandarins. And so ORA ended up stop selling them, which is so disappointing because it was not their fault. The fault lies completely with a hobbyist in feeding their fish, because we have so many choices of fish food on the market. There are, if you go to any fish store, there are rows of pellet food, rows of flake food. There's a freezer full of prepared food. There's a fridge full of prepared food. We have all this stuff to pick from. And so you squirt it, or you drop it, or you stir it into your tank, and then you look at the mandarin and you say, that mandarin's not eating. Well, there could be lots of reasons why a mandarin's not eating. Number one, it's new to the system and is still nervous. Number two, it doesn't recognize the food you're using because that's not what it was eating before, and it has to learn what is, common food for it to eat. Number three, the fish is dying and it wasn't going to eat anyway. I mean, these are some of the things that happen. So I wouldn't get upset if you don't see a fish eating, which is why it's so important to quarantine new fish. Now, we're talking about mandarins, and this is the one fish I don't quarantine. It's the one fish I recommend you put in your reef tank immediately, because you can't give it enough food in quarantine. And I know that sounds weird because I just spent all this time talking about how it will eat prepared foods. Okay, so if you get a mandarin from Biota, I would say, what food are you feeding it? And then have Biota send you that food. Buy it. I don't care if it costs you 20 bucks for a package. It's worth gold if it's the food the fish is eating already. And then you could either stay with that food forever, or you could wean it onto other foods you're preparing, and you'll see if it likes mysis, if it likes pellet, if it likes arctopods from Reef Nutrition. There's all kinds of different foods we can do. You can use the Mandarin Diner system that I recommended. If you wanted to put in quarantine, this is just all fish in general. You put fish in quarantine, they're by themselves or they're with their new buddies that you just bought on the same day, and they learn what food you offer, and by the time you put them in your reef, they know that food, and when you put food in the reef and all the fish go crazy, the new guys realize, I need to get in on this and get a meal too. But mandarins subsist mainly on pods, and I keep reading that they eat 2,000 pods a day. Well, if you're buying a bottle of pods that has, 3,000 or 10,000 pods in there, you're talking about a 5-day supply if it got every pod in the bottle. I'd almost like to take a mandarin, drop it in the bottle, and just let it work its way through. But I had the mandarin in my anemone cube for, I'd say 4 or 5 months. And all that's in the anemone cube are clownfish and anemones. And I thought, well, none of the clowns eat pods, so that's going to be just a pod-rich environment. But the mandarin got thinner and thinner. So I decided I need to scoop it out of that tank, which I did, and I put him in my 400-gallon tank, and he fattened up significantly. So obviously he found much more food in all that live rock. I also want to mention, while we're talking about mandarins, I don't recommend a mandarin in a new, young, immature tank. I like to see you become experienced and let the tank mature for at least 9 months before you get a mandarin. All right. I see I missed a bunch of chat again. My back's been killing me lately. Okay, here's a strange one. Vo Hall, grade 9, says he's in Jamaica and this is his first summer in reefing, and last week he came home to bleached corals, and it seems like only one side of the tank was affected and the water was warmish. Why would only one side be affected? It could be the entire tank got really hot, and the fact that death only occurred on one side, maybe it was being hit by sunlight directly, or it could be death is working its way across the tank. That happens too. So I would look at what, your statement kind of confuses me because you said last week, I know the event happened last week. Do you see your tank every single day? Do you know what the water temperature is during the daytime as well as at night? Can you like check on it 3 or 4 or 5 times over a 24-hour period and kind of learn? Or can you hook up your tank to a controller that will give you a report? that will tell you what the temperature of the water is. We want to keep our tank between 77 and 79 degrees, which is whatever that is, that one by heart. So Google a conversion, but 77 to 79 would be great. The hotter the tank, the more likely your corals will bleach. Once your tank hits 85 degrees Fahrenheit, the oxygen level drops and your fish start gasping because there's less air in the water. So that would in turn also affect how your reef survives. But for one side to get bleached is kind of odd. Sam Osborne asked, would a $45 mandarin be captive bred or ocean caught? I'm going to say ocean caught because it seems like captive bred is always around $80. Texas Reefer USA said, what are your end feelings on the brick you put in your sump to help with nitrate? Didn't work. I just tested nitrate a week ago and it's still around 40 and it didn't bring them down. Now, maybe it maintained them at 40 because it didn't do any water changes for 6 months, but it didn't bring them down. So my choice would be to add a second brick and see if double the volume of brick brings nitrate down, but I'm kind of done. I gave it a shot. I added a whole bunch of microbacter. I added some biofuel. I didn't see any change whatsoever, so I'm going to do that. Johan says, so many live streams. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. I do one every Saturday at 2 o'clock. I do know that there's one going on right now at Tidal Gardens. He's probably doing a coral sale, so there's a little competition. And then there's streams happening from other places, different topics. Mike B, you can watch this whole thing later on. We're already an hour in. We got to wrap this up. The cheapest controller to monitor temperature, salinity, and pH. Maybe the Senai would do that. That one should be affordable, and I think it measures those. Robert Suttle, hey guy. What is the ideal flow through a reef tank? The maximum I can get is twice tank volume per hour. The return just isn't big enough for more. All right, so the flow going through your sump should be 3 to 5 times the size of your display tank. So if you have a 100-gallon tank, you want 300 to 500 gallons an hour going through the return pump. And that's very slow flow, and that allows the filtration to do its job, to clean the water, to polish it, and to remove all the particulates. A lot of people run it faster. The faster the return pump, the more likely for microbubble problems, and it can also lead to adding excess heat to the water, but DC pumps these days have really helped alleviate that problem. So you're not using as much power as you used to, you're not adding heat to the water like you used to, but our return pump's job is to push the water back up to the display, and that's it. It's not designed to put flow in the tank, it's to get the water back into the tank. The flow in the tank comes from the pumps that we have inside it. Vortex, Gyres, MaxiJets, Jabo, these are all examples. Hydor, Current, everyone has pumps on the market. Apex sells the Wave pump. These are all pumps that fit inside the tank that move the water in a circle, and inside the display you want 10 times turnover minimum for a reef. And Dwayne's beautiful SPS reef, he said his was around 50 to 60 times turnover. So he's really moving a lot of water in that display tank to keep his SPS healthy and happy. All right. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. I don't really have any newsy stuff for you. I can tell you that Reef Trace has another update coming out really soon. If you don't have the Reef Trace app yet, it's for iPhone, for iOS, and for Android. And I got to see some new features that are being implemented, and I made a special request as well to change how one function works in there to make it better, and I believe they're going to do that. So that should be coming very soon, I hope. And when that rolls out, you'll find out. I have people that contact me about Reef Trace. They send me private messages saying, this fish store isn't there, or why doesn't it do this? I don't build the app. I'm a partner in the app. And I provide a lot of content for it, and I promote it. And it has been a lot of fun. But when it comes to the technical parts of the app, you need to talk to Reef Trace. If you have a fish store that's missing, send them the information. Send them the name, the address, the phone number, the website. Give them all that information so they can add it to the app. They have gone and verified every store that's listed in there right now to make sure they're open for business. And if they didn't get an answer to their phone call, or if the store just hung up on them thinking it was a sales call, they don't add them to the app because they can't verify this is an actual brick and mortar fish store. They did not want to just have any guy that sells stuff out of his garage in this app. They wanted real physical stores. So, if you send it to me, I will forward it to them, but ideally just contact them directly. And that's it, guys. Thank you for tuning in for the live stream. I hope that you got some of your questions answered and you're happy with that. I just refilled my CO2 tanks. I'm going to order that pH that I need for the calcium reactor video that I would like to get done in the next 2 weeks. So that video will be really good in finally discussing calcium reactors, because we have talked about dosing a lot. And while it's an important topic, calcium reactors have a great benefit to hobbyists as well. And it's what I've been running on my own system since 2004. And so I want to cover that. And I know there's other videos that have probably discussed it already. I'll just do my version of it. And hopefully you'll find it beneficial. Guys, I hope you have a great weekend. I want you to test your water today. I'm going to test mine when I end this stream. And then take those results, stick them in Reef Trace, post your results on Instagram, hashtag water testing, hashtag post your results at Melev's Reef. If you're posting anything on Instagram, make sure it's set to public so we all can see it. Otherwise, no one can. It's a secret. If you want to find me, I'm on Facebook at Melev's Reef. If you want to find me on Instagram, I'm at Melev's Reef. And that's kind of it. I'm still wiped out from yesterday's heat wave. And, Texas it's June and our temperature is so hot. I'm thinking, what will this summer bring? I have a feeling this is going to be a vicious summer. And, we'll see what happens. We've been lucky the last few years. It's been relatively mild, but I think we're going to get hit with a really hot summer. So make sure that your tanks are protected from the heat, that you have yourself set up a system to where it will not overheat and cook your livestock. Cooling fans, chillers, frozen 2-liter bottles in your freezer ready to put in your reef tank if you need to in an emergency. These are all things you should be thinking about right now, not when it happens. Make sure your AC systems are running properly. Make sure that your home is staying the right temperature all day while you're at work, because some people use the Nest thermostat and it turns off the AC or raises it really high, and your tank can get really hot during the daytime. So think of the environmental factors of your home or your place of business, where your aquarium is located, to make sure that it's safe and that your livestock will thrive and not suffer this summer. Guys, I hope you have a great weekend and happy reefing.